Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Crop. I'm Anna Heslop and today I'm talking to Phil Rolston, who received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the recent New Zealand Arable Awards. Until recently, Phil was a senior researcher at FAR and he's now stepping back a bit from work. So I thought we'd have a catch up about that recent award and some of his career highlights. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you, Anna.
Before we go any further, we've had lots of questions. Can you please reassure growers that you're not completely disappearing from their lives?
Yes, certainly I can reassure growers because I enjoy this industry too much to walk away from it, and I definitely intend to be at field days. I've working one day a week with the Seed Industry Research Centre as a technical coordinator. So I'm definitely going to be around and about for the next couple of years.
So it's a bit of a Clayton's retirement.
Absolutely, yep.
That's good. Well, you've been with us at FAR since 2016. We nabbed you when you did your last retirement. But before that, you were at Ag Research, and before that, what was DSIR Grasslands?
Yes.
What led you into herbage seed research?
I got there by a slightly indirect path because I was primarily starting my career as a weed scientist. And I had worked as a university student for some summers on herbage seed farms in West Otago. But I had a scholarship to do a PhD in anywhere I liked, and I was very interested in going to Oregon State University. It had a really, really good weed school. DSIR Grasslands, because I had to be linked to a university, a government department, said, look, we've got this problem with our new white clovers we're breeding about volunteer white clovers. So that's a weed problem. So I went to Oregon State to study weed science and learnt heaps about the seed industry. And when I returned to New Zealand, 78, we started working in weeds, but gradually doing more and more seed production. Some are weed related, but then more and more agronomy. So I grew into the industry.
So from clover, you'll forever be linked with ryegrass. Tell us about what led up to and how Ryegrass 2000 came about and worked.
Yeah. So I moved down when Ag Research was formed, and they actually asked us in the formation of that new institute, where do you think you're best based? And I've been trying to get out of Palmerston North into the heart of the seed industry in Canterbury. And so I said, I really think I should be at Lincoln, and that was agreed to. So coming down here in 1993, I was thinking about what could we do this different? And it was at this time when people were starting to talk about the year 2000, and somewhere along the line I came up with this. Let's see if we can have 2,000 kilos of ryegrass by the year 2000. And Ryegrass 2000 was the name we gave to that. And so it was basically largely an extension platform. We had Ryegrass 2000 clubs. We had competitions that were across Canterbury and got quite a lot of publicity on growers who could achieve 2000, and there were very few of them. And so that's basically the starting blocks of the Ryegrass 2000 program.
So what were those growers that were achieving the 2,000 tonnes, what were they doing differently to the others?
That's something that's always been hard to put your finger on. And even now, a really, really good yield is a combination of good management and some good luck with weather and some other things. The one thing we learnt that most growers could set up a crop. So you're going into flowering, you've got enough reproductive tillers. That wasn't what's holding it was back. It was all about things that were happening from flowering to seed set that seemed to make the difference between high yields and not so high yields.
So that was an extension program, but at the same time, you must have been then finding ways and looking into what was happening from flowering to harvest.
Yeah. So underpinning all that was quite a big research program. Yeah.
Extension doesn't come out of nowhere.
Exactly. And I guess something that's always been dear to me is, as a researcher, I want to do my own extension. And at the time, going into ag research with the Department of Ag people, and they had a model of separate extension people and separate research people. And for me, and perhaps that was out of being brought up on a farm, I wanted to do my extension of my work. Yeah.
So that's how those ryegrass groups and things got set up. And then they got extended to ryegrass 3000.
Yes. So we didn't really make the 2000 target by the year 2000, but in 2001, Modus became available, the plant growth regulator, stem shortening plant growth regulator, and very, very quickly we started to get a good number of growers achieving 2000 and better seed yields. And so once we reached that point, maybe 2004, 2005, we decided we have to have a new target. And so Ryegrass 3000 came out of that target as one or two growers started to reach that target yield.
But you can't have focused on ryegrass the whole time. What other crops have you been involved with?
So I've done Coxfords and tall fescues, so a lot of grasses, but we've also worked, and I worked on plantain from the first early plant breeding releases in the late 80s, chicory when it was developed, and a small amount of work in ryegrass and red clovers and white clover. So I have worked across the full range, but certainly ryegrass has been my baby.
So most recently, you've been working with Canterbury growers on Coxfoot, and they had a problem they just couldn't figure out. Tell us about that one.
Yes, so we had this issue of head bleaching, and particularly in wetter than average seasons, that were having a huge negative effect on seed yield. So we had Mark Braithwaite, the plant pathologist at Templeton, and we spent 3 years collecting samples, trying to see what diseases were there. And Mark could find a huge number of diseases, but it was starting to look like bacterial diseases were very often associated with this issue. And then late last year, Mark accidentally changed the magnification. He widened his search, went for higher magnifications on what he was looking at spores, and discovered this downy mildew, which had a spore much smaller than many downy mildews. This downy mildew was regarded as a new species in New Zealand. It had only ever been reported in the literature in British Columbia about 30 years ago. But when we started looking, we could find it everywhere. So it's not new. And we had a trial up at Methven with a range of mostly fungicide treatments, bactericide treatments, but we threw in a couple of multi-site materials, the Bravo and the Fulpit Phoenix. And those two treatments just shone in terms of how green they were compared to standard fungicide and bactericides. And so we've made a huge step forward in understanding what's causing this problem. We can get really big seed yield responses from things that control downy mildew. So the work is now going into the next phase to sort of fine-tune all that. Downy mildew is not a fungi, doesn't respond to normal fungicides. It has some different biochemistry, so it's the same as our problems in white blister and radish and late blight and potatoes. They're also these oomocytes that are not easy and aren't controlled by normal fungicide programs.
Okay. So what seed industry changes have you noted? Like, are there trends? Do things come and go? And what's been the general shift since you started in the late 70s?
Well, only a small amount of the crop was irrigated in the 70s, and that what was irrigated was with border dike irrigation. Wow. Nitrogen was just starting to be used widely, and a lot of the research was how much autumn nitrogen, how much spring nitrogen, and the rates we were using were very, very conservative. We had no fungicides for controlling stem rust, and so they the first of the triazole fungicides becoming available in the 80s, and so all these things that significant building blocks in what we do became available during this period.
And as all of those things changed, the research had to move with it.
Absolutely. And to give credit to the farmers we work with, they're also very, very innovative, and often would be getting ideas because people were trying different things and saying, this seems to really work. Plus what we were learning from our overseas colleagues about what they were doing. So it was bringing all those things together.
So you touched on, sorry, I'm going backwards a bit, but you touched before on white blister and radish. So obviously people weren't growing radish seed 30 or 40 years ago.
No. And that's, when you look at the value of the small seed business in New Zealand, vegetable seeds now make up almost half the value of the industry. And so that's been built on the back of radish, carrot, both of which New Zealand produces about half the world's hybrid production. We always had a pea industry, which is still strong, but these other small seed vegetables have grown in importance. And particularly, we're one of the few places in the Southern Hemisphere that are good for small seed production. And if you look at a world map, small seed production takes place around close to the 45th parallel, between the 45th and 50th parallel roughly, in maritime coastal areas. So you look in the Southern Hemisphere, there's only South Island, but Canterbury and Tasmania sitting in that latitude in the Southern Hemisphere. And you go through the Northern Hemisphere, you've got from France to Denmark in coastal Europe and Oregon. And there aren't any other places that in the world that have that set of environmental conditions and day lengths associated with latitude.
The world seed community is quite small for that reason, but you've been involved with that for a long time as well. So what sorts of roles have you had there, and how do we work with the international groups, and are we as good as everybody else?
Yeah, so I've been involved in the International Herbid Seed Group, which is a small group of researchers in extension, and we have a conference every 2 to 4 years. I've been to 9 out of the last 10 conferences, and I was president and vice president for a period of about 12 years. We are regarded by our colleagues as being very good. And one of the things I admire about what we have achieved in New Zealand is the way people work together across the different parts of the industry. So the way the universities, the different government departments or research institutes, the grower organisations and some private industry, how they're actually working together and integrating rather than being little separate towers competing with each other.
So we're more collaborative potentially than our international partners.
We have definitely been that, and that's been one of the strengths and one of the things that I think have helped us build the industry the way it's been built.
So that's where we are now. Have you got any ideas about what's going to happen in the future? What's your sneak preview or predictions?
New Zealand's and Canterbury and East Coast North Island are in a strong position because of where we sit in latitude. We're possibly going to be less affected by climate change than Oregon and Europe, and we see what's happened this year in those big seed production areas in terms of drought and super high temperatures. Oregon had the previous season in the seed production areas, temperatures in the mid-40s. And those environmental extremes are really very, very hard on seed when it's developing, and you get a lot of seed abortion, a lot of light seed. Our temperatures tend to be a little bit cooler during seed fill, and the thing we know that if you have sunny weather and cool conditions, you have a long seed fill period and you get really good seed yields. And so that gives us an advantage. Also, although we're feeling the pressure of environmental regulation here, it's nothing compared to what our Danish colleagues and the Danish seed industry is facing. Oregon is facing huge influx of housing and people escaping out of California to a more rural lifestyle. So that's having a huge impact on land availability in Oregon, and Oregon's the biggest seed producer. So we do have problems that our growers have to face, but our competitors are facing lots of problems too. So I think we're in a good position going forward.
That's good to know. Thank you, Phil. Now, we've only managed to focus on a little bit of your New Zealand work because you've also had a very long career working in overseas consultancy in developing countries. So I think we'll book you in for another podcast to talk about that in a wee while because we couldn't possibly fit it into one. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and have a great day on the farm.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.